Welcome to the Kingsburg Community Church podcast, Thinking About Faith. We pray that this podcast helps you deepen your faith in God and stir some inner thoughts about the Christian life.
Hi, everyone. Pastor Ed here. Welcome to the KCC podcast, Thinking About Faith. And we're continuing in the exploration that we started last week that I'm calling Uncommon Sense. We're looking at how the Bible gives us good advice in exercising our freedom. There many of the choices that we make really don't have spiritual or moral content. Bible doesn't really care what brand of shoes you decide to wear, what color of car you decide to drive, whether you decide to take the freeway or the back roads, if you're driving to Hanford. We have many decisions. The majority of our decisions in our day really don't have moral content, but the Bible gives us guidelines to make wiser decisions as opposed to more foolish decisions. And we're going to be looking at those. However, the exception to this rule of kind of non-moral choices is going to be today. So I'm breaking my rule the first time out, as today we're talking about the most important choice you can make, and it's really the only one that has significant moral and spiritual implications. You know, when I came to Kingsburg in 1991, I really didn't know much about agriculture. I was a city boy, grew up in Sacramento, moved to the Bay Area, then lived in Fresno. And, I knew enough that fruit grew on trees. This is embarrassing, but I knew nothing about, moving here to Kingsburg, knew nothing about raisins or how raisins were grown, didn't know what kind of grapes they came from, any of that. I remember the first September I was here, I went out to see Lois Johnson. She was a choir director at the time, and driving onto their ranch, the grapes were down drying on the trays, the paper trays that they used back then. And if you've ever seen raisin grapes drying about 3 or 4 days in, it's not the most beautiful thing in the world, because the grapes they're kind of half green, half brown. They're not plump. They're somewhat deflated, but they're not shriveled up yet. The stems look just horribly dried and ugly. There's spiders and dirt and all sorts of stuff because they're laid out on the ground. And frankly, I was horrified. And, I love raisins, always have, but I thought, oh my gosh, that's how raisins are made. That's just disgusting. And of course, they laughed at me because, how do you think your food is made, city boy? And over the years, I've learned a couple of things that to me were surprising about agriculture. One of the things that I learned just within the last couple of years, I did not realize that the majority of the stone fruit, and at least the almonds and citrus here in our region, when you see the trees in the orchard, the fruit-bearing trees are actually grafted in to a different variety or even species of rootstock. And so an almond tree can have a peach tree rootstock, and most all of the bearing parts of the trees are grafted into a hardier rootstock in order to try to avoid disease. Apparently, nematodes, little things that live underneath the ground, are really horrible. They eat the roots and kill the tree from the roots up. And so there are resistant types of rootstocks that are hardy, resistant against nematodes. So you use those. I don't know about you, but when I think of the fruit trees, the nut trees that we're surrounded by here in Kingsburg, I usually think about what's above the ground. I mean, that's the fruit tree, the fruit and the leaves and the branches. And I really don't think very much about what's underneath the ground. But if you're a stone fruit farmer or almond farmer, you know that everything depends on the part of the tree that you can't see. If you don't have good, healthy roots, you're going to have a tree that may die because of disease, or it may not produce enough to make your farm profitable. Now, last week, I started talking about the freedom from legalism the Bible offers us, and of course it does. But I said that with that freedom comes a responsibility to learn how to make the wise use of our freedom. And whereas, most of our choices are free from moral content, the most important choice we make, the fundamental choice that we make, is it's a matter of life and death, but it's a matter of great moral and spiritual importance. It is the choice of what we think about God and his place in our life. God gives us the freedom to choose to follow him or to turn away from him and refuse even to believe in him. That's a staggering responsibility, that God would not overrule human will, but would allow us the freedom to choose to follow him and to love him and to honor him. But he's also given us the freedom to turn and walk away, to say no thank you to God. And that's just mind-blowing, that the God who created the universe, created the Milky Way, created the millions of galaxies, with that power would allow feeble, finite creations like human beings to say no to him, or to say no thank you to him. And it's the incredible weight of that fundamental choice in our lives that we hear over and over again is the most important choice and the fundamental choice of exercising our freedom. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, the very beginning of the wisdom of Solomon, we read this: "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." Again in Proverbs 9:10, and it's repeated again in Psalm 111:10. So that means that this is a proverb that was repeated over and over again, so much so that David that it was actually put into the Psalms. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. Now, if you've been around the Bible at all, you probably know that the Hebrew word that's translated fear in the fear of the Lord does not mean fear like maybe you're afraid of heights, or maybe you're afraid of the dark or things like that. It's not an emotional response, that kind of fear. Well, it involves emotion, but it's deeper than that. The fear of the Lord is profound respect, awe, and reverence for God's power, holiness, and authority. I'll never forget being with my family at the American Cemetery in Normandy, surrounded by the rows and rows of white crosses of those who came ashore on the D-Day landing and never made it home, died there, and they're buried there, and they are memorialized. And I remember that it's a very somber place. We were walking among the graves. We came to the place where the monument was, and it was just the top of the hour. And at the top of the hour, the hour was rung, and a bugler started playing taps. And there were hundreds of people in the cemetery, and everybody just stopped, transfixed, while the bugler played. And it was a hush. Nobody told us that we needed to stop. Nobody told us, told people to quiet down or anything like that. It was just a natural sense of awe and respect as we're surrounded by the graves of those who paid the ultimate price for the freedom of France and the defense of the Western world. And it was that level of awe and respect. I think that's touching on what it means to fear the Lord, to have that sort of awesome respect where you just stand in awe of him and you feel the insignificance of your own life, the smallness of your own being, and you are engulfed with a sense of his majesty and his power, but as well, it brings it home to you how great his grace is that he would even consider your life or my life worth anything. The fear of the Lord, that awesome respect, is the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of knowledge. The Bible also says the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And that, again, that's the downside of that most important choice that we can make. It's possible. God gives us the freedom to say there's no God, to turn, live our own life. Or maybe there is a God, but I don't really care. I'm going to live my own life. We can choose to ignore him. We can choose to just give him a sliver of our time or attention. Or we can do what my favorite verse in Proverbs chapter 3, you probably know this, advises us to do: trust in the Lord with all your heart. So with all your heart, wholehearted trust in God, and do not lean on your own understanding. You know, we sometimes think we're smart or we're sophisticated or we're competent or we're brilliant. Our opinion means so much. You know, we live in an opinion age where opinion trumps facts. And the truth of it is our knowledge and understanding is so elementary. We're like preschool children, not even that compared to the wisdom of the greats of our faith. And even above that is the wisdom of God. And so don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. To acknowledge God in everything we do. Some religious systems like Islam, they stop 5 times a day to pray. And I'm not saying that's a bad practice, but the New Testament actually says pray without ceasing, that we should always strive to be constantly aware of God's presence with us and around us. And that's a goal I've not come close to reaching, but it's an aspiration for all of us, that when we put God first, when we truly trust in him with all our heart, he's always there with us, and we practice his presence. Mark chapter 8, Jesus asks, and it's repeated in Matthew 16:26, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about good advice from Scripture. But even as we listen to that good advice and hopefully make wiser choices because of it, we have to realize that the fundamental choice, if we don't make the right choice with God's place in our life, then all the rest of it doesn't matter. You can be the wisest person in the world, but what does it profit that man if you gain the whole world, but you forfeit your soul? So only by putting God first. And conversely, we can make a lot of foolish choices in life, but if we choose to focus our lives and build our life on our faith, we're going to do okay in eternity. Still wouldn't want to be a foolish person, make foolish decisions, but at the same time, the fundamental choice is the choice of what we mean in following God. There are a couple of reasons why it's to our best interest. It's not like God is some great egotistical power like the ancient Greek gods who loved having people grovel before them. It's actually because we were created with an instinct for God, a need for God. And because of that, we have unmet needs in our hearts unless God fills that vacuum. We have a need for meaning. You don't have to ever teach your child to say why. You know, the little kids drive you nuts. Why? There's an inbred question in the human heart of what is the meaning of my life? What is the purpose of my existence? what happens when I die? What's the difference between good and evil, and how can you know the difference? These are all philosophical questions, but they're really important questions that all human beings wrestle with. And the truth is that without God, there is no meaning. And that's a very, very sad place to go. If you ever want to be depressed, read Solomon's words in Ecclesiastes. Supposedly the wisest man who ever lived. He starts out in Ecclesiastes saying, vanity of vanities, all is vanities. The Hebrew word for vanity is mist or vapor. That means all the things you think are important, it's just a mist or a vapor. It doesn't last long. When there's a little bit of ground fog and the sun comes up, it doesn't last very long. It's not even a Christian proverb. It's a proverb we hear where people say, time always wins. Eventually, there's a hymn, I think a Shelley hymn, Ozymandias, and it was all about a traveler in a desert land comes along a vast set of legs, just legs, standing in the desert, and off to the side is the head of this great king, and his name was Ozymandias, and the inscription says, "Look upon me and shiver," or something like that, because he was the king of the world. And now, of course, nobody even knows who he is, and even his great stone statue has come to ruin. Time always wins. And that's why at the end of Ecclesiastes, Solomon sums up 11 chapters of teaching, and he says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. That really it all ends where it began, with God looking at us and either accepting us because of his grace, accepted by us through faith, or saying, no, I don't know you. It's only when God is in our life that we can make some sense of tragedy. It doesn't matter how wise your choices, how fortunate you were to be born in the United States, maybe to have loving parents, grandparents, those things. Eventually, your life is going to be touched by tragedy, by a mistake you made or someone else made that cost you. You will have pain. You will experience or you will witness unjust suffering. You will suffer loss. It's just what it means to be human being in a broken world. And those moments of tragedy in our lives threaten to undo us. Why, if God, if you love me, is this pain in my life? Why do I have to suffer? Why did you take this person before their time? It's a challenge we all have. And what I've found is that the stronger our faith, the longer we've walked with God, the more we've reflected on God's love despite suffering. We can find comfort in our suffering. We can even find purpose in some suffering. Some will have to wait until the life to come to understand. But we can find hope beyond suffering because we believe that after the cross and the agony of death on the cross for human sin, there is a moment of resurrection. Finally, our hearts desire everlasting joy. Of all the joys of human existence, most of them are temporary. The symphony ends. The museum closes and your reflection on a beautiful piece of artwork comes to an end. The delicious meal is consumed or you can't eat anymore. The children grow up and they move away. So the joys of human existence, they're like the little sample you get at Baskin-Robbins on the pink spoon. They give you they're great with the samples because they know the more you sample, the more you're going to want 3 scoops instead of 2 because you can't make up your mind. it's just the joys of this world are not meant to satisfy us for eternity. They're passing. The joys of this world are a foretaste of the eternal feast to come. You know how it is on Christmas when, I don't know, we have prime rib on Christmas. So it takes, 4 or 5 hours for the prime rib to get done. And meanwhile, the twice baked potatoes are baking and the pies have been done, since the day before. Christmas has a certain smell in the kitchen that's pretty good, but the aroma is just the prelude to the feast that's going to come. And the joys of this world, don't hang on to them with both hands because they're passing. They're just the aroma of Christmas that is to come and the eternal feast that we'll never get tired of. So make the wise choice. Where is God in your life? Are you following him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Are you just, you were passionate in your faith, but kind of the cares of the world got in the way? Have you kind of faded in your intensity of your faith? I would just say, in the days that you have left, do what you can to build up the space that you give to God in your life. Rely on him. And I think what it's going to do is, I think it's really going to enhance your life. You're going to be able to face life without fear, with confidence, with joy. You'll be able to delight in God's people and in that community. Tend to the roots, the part of your life that other people can't see. And I promise you, the fruit will be wonderful. Thanks for listening. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, make sure we get them. We'll talk to you next week.